When I started playing Dune, the first thing I noticed is that the environment is big. You got a lot of distance to cover and a lot of different places you can go. You can pretty much climb anywhere, go anywhere, and early game is definitely going to feel different depending on how you set your character up for that stage of the game. Things like being able to completely negate fall damage, for example, when you jump off a huge ledge, or having easy escapes from a really bad combat situation are going to be crazy useful for the beginning of the game. Now, I myself played a full melee build when I wanted to try out Dune during these beta tests, and I loved it because of how mobile you could be on a build like this. But I think that this extends past just playing a melee build. For early game, having big mobility options is a huge deal, especially since you're not going to get access to a vehicle outside of the sand bike until you've got at least 15 or 20 levels under your belt. And without these mobility options, especially for early game, I think that Dune will feel nowhere near as fun to play. And we all know that the first few hours that you play a game have a huge impact on how much you do or don't like that game. So I made this video not only to show off the early game melee build that I put together, but kind of give you guys a little bit of a heads up on what can make this experience a lot more fun for you, at least at the beginning stages. Nobody wants to be taking forever traveling from point A to point B. God knows I've had enough of a running simulator having played the early stages of New World myself. Not to mention, if you want to do any kind of fast-paced combat, these mobility skills are going to have a huge impact on that. So let's start off with the first big tip, at least for me. I would recommend, no matter what you want to play long-term, that you pick Swordmaster for your class. The reason I say this is because Swordmaster gets access to the knee dash right away, and that knee dash has excellent mobility. I mean, it launches you forward a huge distance, and it does a ton of damage to anything it connects with. On top of that, it also staggers anything that it connects with. And the second reason why I say I think Swordmaster is arguably the best first class to go with is because of how the class system in Dune works. You are not limited to just the class that you pick. In fact, that's just your starting point, and then as you play the game, you will unlock the other classes, and you can use all of the different passives and active skills from the various different classes to put a build together. So at the end of the game, everybody will kind of be every class. So having that mobility, at least for the beginning when you have to travel across the sand, is going to cut down a lot of travel time for you. On top of it, I would recommend the Swordmaster because the next best mobility skill, arguably maybe even better than the dash itself, is that grappling hook that you get from the Trooper class tree. And you guys can see that as the C skill on my bar here. You can use it for moving around the map, which is crazy useful. In fact, it just makes climbing up any height so much easier. But on top of that, it's actually quite useful for combat too. You can stagger an opponent if you hit it with the grappling hook, and it kind of pulls the opponent a little bit towards you. But I think the most valuable aspect of that grappling hook is the fact that it allows you to escape a fight super easily. Now, the reason that I say Swordmaster is the early game class that you want to go with and not Trooper is because you actually get access to the Trooper class really early in the game. The first major quest hub that you go to, you will be able to get the Trooper class tree, at least the beginnings of it, and access to that grappling hook. Now, I don't want to spoil too much about the game for you guys, but I will say this. It's that first kind of major quest hub that you get to where you start picking up missions, and you cannot miss the guy. He's standing right there. Just have a chat with him, and bam, he gives you a mission, and you can unlock the Trooper tree. And it took me something like an hour of gameplay to get access to the Trooper tree and have it unlocked. So let's take a little bit of a look at the class system itself, and I'll show you guys the build that I'm running. There is that knee charge from Swordmaster that you get right off the bat. It'll be one of the first, if not the first ability that you get, and it's going to be a huge deal for your melee builds especially, but just traversing the map like I had said earlier. And one of the big pluses of this skill is it does a ton of damage. I think it's one of the higher damage skills that I got access to, at least for the earlier stages of the game. And then on my next skill here, you can see the Shigawire Claw. That's the grappling hook that I'm talking about, one of the first abilities that you get when you pick up that Trooper class. Now, on top of those 3 active abilities, you also get 3 passive abilities that you can. So the first one that we have here is the Suspender Dash, and this basically allows you to do an air dash that costs you power instead of stamina to use. This is very useful, not only for helping you kind of position yourself after using the claw, but the big plus of it, and it has a huge impact for early game, is the fact that you can negate fall damage when you use it. You just have to use it right before you hit the ground, and all that momentum is gone, and you won't take any damage. Now, this next passive here is a little bit more applicable to something like a melee build where you're using a lot of stamina, but in general, especially since you might have some issues with hydration early game, having a little bit more stamina does not hurt, and you get access to the Disciplined Breathing passive pretty early on. I think you just need to get a couple levels to unlock it in your Swordmaster tree, as it's unlocked pretty quickly after you have the knee dash. And this is just going to allow you to have a better stamina recovery rate. I know it sounds simple, but stamina recovery is basically your ability to move around, and with melee builds, it's your ability to keep attacking. So it comes in super handy for those early stages. And the final passive I have here, simply because there weren't any really good mobility option passives for the early stages of the game, is to give me a little bit more damage mitigation when I lunge at an opponent with my sword. That's really just for a melee build, but those first two passives that I talked about are the big ones for that early game. And now we'll take a look at the rest of the build here. As you can see, the Field Medicine was the passive I took just because I wanted to get to that stamina recovery. But the rest of the kind of circle passives here that are up all the time and you don't need to slot are all stamina focused passives. So they have a huge impact on you being able to use a melee weapon and traverse your environment for those early stages of the game. In the will tree, honestly, unless you're playing a melee build, these passives aren't going to be super applicable to you. And then in the blade tree, these are all blade damage passives. So again, if you're playing a melee build, these are awesome. If you're not, the trooper tree will have a pretty similar option in the gunnery side of things for your gun setup. And here you can see that Shigawire Claw. I highly recommend getting this as your first trooper skill once you unlock the trooper class. You can go for the circle passive on the right there, which does reduce the cooldown of the Shigawire Claw, which is really nice, at least if you want to have a little bit more mobility options. And then here you can see on the left side here, we've got that Suspensor Dash, and that is so important. This one I can't recommend enough. And then I do have that little circle passive above it just to have the power drain of the Suspensor be a little bit less. And then on that gunnery side, you can see I took a couple of the gunning passives just because I had some points and I didn't have any of the other classes unlocked at this stage of the game yet. As you guys notice, I don't actually have access to the third ability. I didn't get to play enough to fully unlock all of the abilities for my character, but if I did get access to it, there are a few good options, at least for mobility and a melee build. The Bindu Sprint being one of them, giving you just a much faster sprint. But I think the creme de la creme of abilities for at least a melee build would be the Weirding Step. It allows you to teleport basically behind your opponent and then just start backstabbing the shit out of them. So a little bit less all applicable mobility and a little bit more for a melee build with that one. But those are at least the two skills that I myself have eyed up for the playstyle I like to do. Now, I myself was not able to find out where the Bene Gesserit class was actually unlocked. I have seen other players that were playing the closed beta who did have access to these skills, so I believe you can get them at least in the first or second zone. But again, you know, I just got to play the game more, and we'll learn more about that stuff as we get to experience the open beta that's coming up on May 9th. Anyhow, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope that this gave you at least a little bit of useful info for your first few hours in Dune. As always, have a great night, everybody, and I'll see you next time. Oh, and don't get eaten by that sandworm. You'll lose everything.